Thanks, you don't have to save the applause until afterwards. I think that's probably a much safer bet. So I am this person, I am Peter Holbrook, with my 2-2 honours degree in environmental management from Preston. I'm also Chief Exec of Social Enterprise UK. I'm currently the elected chair of the World Social Enterprise Forum, which brings together the social enterprise movement across the globe. I'm also a director of Big Society Trust, which is overseeing Big Society Capital, which is a fund. I never thought that I would be a banker. I did say banker, but I am a banker. We are looking after about £600 million of money to invest in civil society organisations, social enterprises and charities. And I'm also a mutuals ambassador. Get me. Right, so what do I want to talk to you about today? Well, first of all, it is a conversation. There is no script. I've got a lot of slides, but they're not very kind of text heavy. I've tried to use pictures to make it reasonably informal. There is time for questions at the end of the chat rather than the lecture. But if you think that you've got something that you want to say at any point during the next 40 minutes, 45 minutes or so, then speak up. As I say, I don't have a script, so I don't mind interruptions. In fact, it's really good to know that you are awake in this very hot and sweaty room. So yeah, pipe up if I say anything that you disagree with, that you agree with, or that you would like some clarification around. So this presentation is called Time for Social Enterprise. And the reason why there's a picture of the Earth there is because, as we probably know, the Earth is about 4.5 billion years old. And it's been doing quite nicely over the majority of that time, except for a few ice ages and volcanic dust clouds and the extinction of the dinosaurs. But generally, it's been a reasonably stable place over that period of time. Before I go into why it is time for social enterprise, I thought I should do the kind of the most simple things first, like what is it? So for me, it's very simple. There's lots of debate and discussion about definitions, and they bore me, frankly. But fundamentally, for us at Social Enterprise UK, it means this. It means a business that's trading for a permanent and primary social or environmental purpose. And in terms of the broader kind of economic piece, that means that it's a system that balances economic development, which has been good for humanity, with collective social need, where perhaps traditional economics has not always met the needs of everybody around the globe, and also environmental sustainability. And of course, we know that we're kind of at a tipping point in terms of the Earth's capacity to absorb our collective impacts on it. So this is kind of a new economic model, but it's not that new. For me, it absolutely started perhaps, well, hundreds of years ago, when you started getting people like monks brewing up strong batches of wine and ale to sell in order that they could fund their mission. More recently, I think it could be addressed through the cooperative group, which is now over 150 years old and is now turning over £18 billion and a lot of crack cocaine and all sorts of other bits and pieces. I'm going to gloss over the cooperative group. It's not the sector's finest moment. Not all cooperatives are social enterprises necessarily, because not all of them embed true environmental sustainability and kind of progressive social thinking within them. But there are some fine examples of social enterprises that adopt cooperative models. So for me at Social Enterprise UK, we accredit social enterprises through our badges. We work with the corporate sector and governments and local statutory organisations that support social enterprise. And then just yesterday, we announced Cornwall as the country's first social enterprise rural zone. We have Bristol and Plymouth as social enterprise cities. And we have towns and more in the pipeline. Today, a colleague of mine is in Digbeth in Birmingham. Lucky him. And he is announcing Digbeth as the country's first social enterprise quarter. So it's definitely a growing movement. We were established in 2002. We have a membership of 20,000 organisations, most of them being social enterprises themselves. And we bring all of those different types of organisations together. And in essence, we are the voice of our members. We are the voice of the movement, and we try to be authentic in that. We're democratic. We're owned by our membership. And we try absolutely to represent their interests through our work, which is both around policy, campaigns, political influencing, work on the ground with local government, statutory organisations, universities, housing associations, and also directly through the media. So we've had a really good and fruitful relationship with the Evening Standard in London, with the Independent on Sunday, but we try and get letters published in the Financial Times and the Guardian, even sometimes the Daily Mail. which makes my mum very happy, because my mum is a Daily Mail reader. And that's kind of what we try and do, and we try and showcase the benefits of social enterprise. So anyway, back to kind of where we are right now. In the UK alone, we have 70,000 social enterprises. These are the Department for Business, Innovation and Skills figures. Over 1 million staff employed within them. 39% of social enterprises are based in areas of economic deprivation. So they thrive in areas where there's been traditional market failure. 60% grew last year, well, 59%, but nearly 60% grew last year compared to just 28% of small and medium private sector enterprises. 57% predict growth next year. 38% are led by women, which is fantastic compared to things like the FTSE 100, where it's 3%. In the SME sector, more broadly, it's around 20%. So women fare really well in the social enterprise sector and kind of challenge that glass ceiling. And 75% of social enterprises actively involve their beneficiaries and their stakeholders and their customers in the governance of those businesses. And they are businesses. So that's a really kind of growing and thriving movement. And it's anticipated by the government now that between 1 in 5 and 1 in 3 new business startups are a social enterprise, which is a phenomenal rate of growth. The point being here that if this trend continues, as it has done over the last 15 years, then the social enterprise sector is going to become a much more significant part of the economy. It's growing faster, there are more startups, they're succeeding faster, and it's an international movement which is really gaining pace in places like Indonesia, South Korea. I just came back from China last week, where there's a huge growth in social enterprise. So here's a couple of examples just to put some kind of meat on the bone. There's my friend Charles with my really good friend Karen. They set up Hill Holt Wood a number of years ago. They bought a plot of woodland and they wanted to turn it into an enterprise. And fundamentally, they take groups of excluded young people, young offenders in the majority, to learn woodland skills, arboriculture, tree surgery, all that kind of stuff, growing, planting, building these eco buildings here made of mud and straw with high levels of sustainability. And the whole ambition here is to build a woodland that protects the biodiversity, actually improves the biodiversity by clearing out things like rhododendron bushes, is a place that can create employment for disadvantaged people and puts all of its profits back into further environmental projects. They've moved from running this woodland, which is one of the largest employers in its rural community, to now refurbishing old houses that have been out of use, creating homes for all sorts of other people. HCT Group is another such example. It's a bus company. It started as a dial-a-ride service, ferrying disabled people around, and it grew, it reinvested its profits back into itself. It started buying buses, competing to run bus routes, and it does two things as a social enterprise, which makes it very different. It actively goes out of its way to train disadvantaged people, particularly women, to become bus drivers, because a career, if you're from a poor community, as a bus driver is actually very well paid compared to comparable jobs. Bus drivers in London are earning around £35,000. For many of the women that end up as bus drivers within this social enterprise, comparable salaries would be in health and social care, domiciliary care, those kinds of careers. So it's an economic leg up for poor and disadvantaged communities. And for young offenders and young black guys coming out of prison and all sorts of different kind of excluded groups. And then they also, with their profits, put in bus services in areas that would not be contracted by a local authority to be served by buses. So areas that suffer from transport isolation. They put additional routes in for free to serve those communities. And this is a competing large business. It runs bus services in Jersey, Guernsey, across central London, Hull, Bristol. It's a big £50 million a year business, and it's profitable. It's achieved investment, and it's putting significant sums of money back in to tackle a whole range of local and societal issues. And then there's this one. PM Training actually used to be a private business. A housing association in Stoke-on-Trent called the Aspire Group bought this business about 7 or 8 years ago now. It's more than trebled in size. That figure is out of date. The chief exec tells me it's now 20,000 young people that have failed through the educational system, that have come out of school with less than they might expect in terms of academic qualifications, are taken on as apprenticeships, as apprentices, put through an apprenticeship approach, in all sorts of different industries, and then they feed them into a private sector supply chain so that these people that perhaps wouldn't have had the greatest job opportunities can progress careers and become more economically independent, not dependent. And so you can see that this is a grounds maintenance company in essence. It goes out and does home repairs, landscaping, gardening, plumbing, carpentry. It has a telesales service. It does a whole range of different businesses within the group that basically have transitioned thousands and thousands of people that would otherwise not be in employment into good quality, high quality jobs. And as a social enterprise, all of the profits that this company makes are there to regenerate Stoke Centre. And Stoke Centre, for anyone been to Stoke? Boy, it needs regeneration. So that's what the company is doing, and it's having a really, really significant impact. And Samwell Community Caring Trust does residential care. And, you know, this is an organisation that was given over the responsibility to run local authority care homes for people with Down syndrome, learning disabilities, Alzheimer's, dementia, and elderly infirm people, and have halved the costs of health and social care for that local authority and have improved the quality to the highest 3-star rating that's available to them. So half the cost, a higher quality. You know, these new models are kind of reinventing the way that we deliver some public services as well. Why is all this important, and how does it fit into that earlier slide? So this is the kind of the scary bit. So prediction, first of all, is very difficult, especially about the future. It's a bit of a cliche, but it's very, very true. But certain things we absolutely do know. Now, this slide is called the Great Acceleration. And what we see here is, as I said, the Earth is 4.5 billion years old, slightly older than that. We can see that everything's been pretty stable in terms of human development over the last kind of from 1750 through to 1950. Over that 200-year block, there was some peaks and some slight changes, but basically development was pretty moderate. In the last, I guess, 70 years, from 1950 onwards, we have seen this huge race in all sorts of different things, whether it's species extinctions, whether it's the growth of motor vehicles, which is the black line, whether it's foreign investment, which is the grey line, whether it's surface temperatures of the Earth, population, GDP. The last 70 years has completely transformed the entirety of planet Earth. And those figures aren't about to stop. The problem that we are seeing is that the human demand and our traditional experience of economic development and growth over the last, I guess, 50, 60 years, as it continues to grow, we are beginning to realise that our demands and our expectations far outweigh the ability of the Earth to accommodate those demands. So just a couple of slides here. This is 1961 to 1990 and what's happened in terms of water availability. And what we're seeing is more and more of the planet suffering extreme water availability in parts of the world where we need it most. So you can see these red parts of the globe, the planet is under extreme stress in terms of being able to provide the clean water that human growth and development requires. Another slide here on soil degradation. Again, you can see Britain there, the central belt of England having had severe soil degradation over the last 50 years. You're seeing now parts of Africa, South America, whole ranges of what was once very, very fertile land becoming incredibly degraded. And actually, if you look at where we have stability, it's in the least populated parts of the planet and certain parts of Eurasia, which still remain reasonably fertile. Bit of a scary statistic there from Jason. To meet the increasing demand from a growing population, we will need to produce more food in the next 40 years than we've produced in the last 8,000. And so what's happening as these pressures for water and fertile soil and growing populations emerge is that we are seeing a whole range of reasonably wealthy countries go on this mission of land grab. So we are seeing countries right around the world recognise that they're going to have a problem probably within the next 2 to 3 decades and buying up huge swathes of land in poorer parts of the world. So you can see that countries like Russia and China are really, really accelerating the extent at which they're buying up huge amounts of land so that they can protect their own population's needs for food and for water going ahead. And that doesn't necessarily bode well for the developing world once again. So we're expecting, according to the United Nations, the world population to peak at around 9.5 billion in 2050. Actually, the developing world is going to see the bulk of that at the very time that their capabilities to absorb that population growth are going to become increasingly limited. And no surprise there that you can see China and India at the forefront of those population growths. And actually the developed world, you know, kind of already achieving a degree of stability. If that wasn't bad enough, you know, we've got this huge growth in kind of humankind, mankind, womankind on the planet. The other problem that we've got to tackle is obviously the issues around demographics and an ageing population. So this chart just shows you life expectancy at birth in 1962. And for those of you at the back that maybe can't see, the yellow areas are life expectancy below the age of 35. The pale green is 35 to 40, and as we work through the greens and go into the blues, life expectancy increases. And so the dark blues are 70 to 83. And what's happened between 1962 and 2004 is that not only are we seeing a massive spike, everyone is beginning to live a lot longer. So the whole kind of world population and increases in life expectancy poses a major, major strain on our planetary resources. And it's not just, we're not just developing in a kind of traditional way. We are seeing a mass migration of people into cities. And of course, for those of us of a certain age, and I'm now over 40, when we started thinking about the future of cities, it was all very Star Trek, and our idea of future cities may have looked slightly like this. The reality, when we see the growth of cities right across the world, is that they don't look like this. They actually look like this. They are unstable. They have high rates of kind of disease. They have poor sanitation, poor hygiene, and our whole kind of notion of what the future might look like is being challenged by the reality of what it's beginning to look like. And on top of all of those problems around soil degradation and you know, less water, clean, safe water to drink, human population growth, this is a climate change. The International Panel on Climate Change Scenarios, who back in the year 2000 plotted what they thought might be the case. And again, for those of you that can't see, they came up with a whole variety of about 4 or 5 different scenarios that are the straight coloured lines. So you've got worst case scenario through to best case scenario. Best case scenario is at the bottom and worst case scenario is right at the top. And this squiggly black line shows you where we're heading. And actually where we're heading is probably for the worst case scenario, not the best, unfortunately. Of course, you might recognise what caused the blip in around 2008. Any ideas? Global financial crisis, of course, where economic development halted across large swathes of the planet, and therefore CO2 emissions dropped. But fundamentally, everyone, it's okay, we're out of a recession, we're back on track to hit the worst case scenario for CO2 emissions. And this is a very credible report from PwC. And they have suggested, and the United Nations have suggested, that we should be able to perhaps mitigate global warming at an increased rate of 2% around the globe. And what this chart is showing is that we are absolutely hideously off track in meeting that. So if we were going to achieve some kind of level of decarbonisation of our economy to hit that kind of, well, we've already kind of missed the 2 degrees. We're now looking at probably kind of a 4 degrees. To achieve the 2 degrees, we're going to have to see a reduction of 5.1% of carbon around the world, and we are a long, long way from achieving that. And of course, every year, you know, the government, can we afford green levies on our energy bills? No, of course we can't. Let's all take £50 off our energy bills, and that only ceases to continue to progressively tackle this emerging crisis. And so it looks like we're heading for 4 degrees in your lifetimes, not my lifetime, I'm all right, and a few of you might be all right, but for most of you, you're going to experience planetary increases in temperature around the globe of 4%, and at 4% you can see on this chart, which is from the Stern Review, highly, highly regarded scientist, that we're going to see massive falling crop yields at a time when we need to produce more food than ever before. We're going to see sea level rises threatening major cities, massive species extinction, rising intensity of storms, forest fires, droughts, flooding and heat waves. Gosh, I bet you're glad you came. And of course, as we see human development progress, and you can't blame the developing world for doing this, but you can see as countries move and develop, and you see a burgeoning of the middle classes, you can see what happens to those countries. Their carbon footprint just continues to grow. We need to be at this place at the bottom. And again, what you can see is as the developing world develops, it's not moving into that space. It's moving up into the high carbon space. And this is a major challenge. You can't tell developing world countries that they can't develop. And yet we are failing to invest in the sorts of technologies and economic models that can help address these kind of urgent and hypercritical problems. So, and you'll be aware, I'm sure, a number of natural catastrophes worldwide. I mean, you've spent your lives growing up in a world of crisis, so I'm sure none of this comes as a shock. But, you know, if people question the kind of climate change science, you know, just the rate of natural catastrophes demonstrates that we have a major challenge ahead, and that trend, that black line, is only going to increase. Now, what's also really interesting on this is the World Economic Forum's Register of Global Risks. Now, the World Economic Forum is not known for being particularly socially progressive. It tends to be completely owned and shaped by the wealthiest, richest, most powerfulest and influential people in the world. But each year they create a risk register, and this is the risk register. And of course you can't read it, so let me help you out. What we have at the top, so here you've got likelihood to occur in the next 10 years versus impact of the risk. What we're actually beginning to see is, yes, climate change is a terrible concern. Antibiotic resistance is a major concern. Proliferation of orbital debris, less of a concern. But actually when you start looking at things like climate change, it's not there at the top. One of the greatest risks that the World Economic Forum now identify, even beyond global warming, are fiscal imbalances and severe income disparity. Let's just have a look at that and look what's happened in terms of wealth distribution as we move on from global warming. So unfortunately, the super rich, any super rich in the room? No? The super rich in the last 3 decades have basically taken masses and masses of the new economic wealth that has been created. We are not sharing wealth. The new wealth that's created across the planet is not being shared equally. We are seeing the top 20%. So they are people, I guess, that would be earning probably over, I don't know, £70,000 a year, probably your lecturers. Is that right? Over £70,000 a year? Maybe not. Those in the top 20% have done a little bit better. But it's the top 1% who have taken virtually all of the new wealth created in the last 3 decades. So income disparity is growing massively rapidly, which is why even the rich are concerned, because that creates all sorts of social unrest. It pushes communities to migrate. It has a major impact. Bournemouth is a classic area, I think, whereby you have poverty and you have very, very wealthy areas. When you're living cheek by jowl as someone on a low income next to people that have very, very high income, that income disparity feels far, far more impactful on your life. And so these kinds of cities like London, where you now have very, very poor people living cheek by jowl to the very, very rich, creates the opportunity for social unrest, rioting and all sorts of other issues. And at the same time, the super rich, surprise, surprise, are paying less tax than they ever have, which is great news for them. So back in about 30, this is the same period of time, over 30, well, 95 to 2009, so over a 15-year period, what you've seen is the average rate of tax paid by the super rich has gone down from 30 to 22.4% as they've become more adept at avoiding tax. They might choose to locate their businesses in Luxembourg, or they might decide to notionally locate themselves in a tax haven. At the same time, what we've seen is kind of global unemployment increase from 5.6% to 9.3%. And the point really here is that the more wealth that's captured by the top 1%, the more money there is to go around and spend. Because once you've got enough super yachts and private islands and private aircraft and all the rest of it. What do you do with your money? Often it's invested, but often you sit on it. It's dormant. Money works much more effectively when it's in the hands of the poor and middle classes who spend it. And when it's spent, it stimulates the economy much more effectively. So these two things are in correlation. They are in synchronicity with each other. So you've got increasing unemployment and challenging issues around kind of economic productivity at the same time as there is this massive cash grab by the very richest 1% in the world. And of course, what we know is that once you reach a certain amount of income, you don't actually get any happier. It's evident right across the globe in countries like Sweden and Japan that once you have enough, you have shelter and you have food and you have enough money to go and get smashed at the weekend and that kind of stuff, actually money ceases to give you additional happiness and quality of life. So this has created massive a massive lack or breach of trust. And this chart, which is quite an old one, I apologise, I couldn't find a more recent one for today's conversation with you, but just shows, I think, where trust is. So does anyone have any thoughts about what might be at the bottom of the trust ranking at the moment? Journalists and MPs. The bankers. This is 2002, so this is before the banking crisis. But actually, and any ideas about who might be at the top? You'd hope, wouldn't you? You'd really, really hope. What do we think? So global companies and large national companies, even in 2002, before the global economic crisis, were bottom of the trust index, apart from one group, and someone said MPs, and I think, you might be right, Parliament or Congress. Who is the most trusted institution in the world? Lecturers. Guest lecturers in particular, I hope. Actually, bizarrely for me, a bit disconcerting, it's the armed forces. We have more trust in our armed forces than we do in NGOs like Oxfam. But right at the bottom, and this is where the interesting thing is that global companies and large national companies and Parliament, so our economic leaders and our democratic leaders are right at the bottom of the trust index there. Now, this isn't taken from the Bournemouth University campus, as you can imagine. Politics and activism isn't necessarily quite as evident on this campus as it is at the London University right now. But this whole kind of global frustration, a lack of faith that our democratic institutions are working in our best interests, alongside a sense that businesses are disconnected from communities, from society, even from their employees, is creating a profound movement. And I think, you know, just to reflect on this, yes, Occupy movement didn't really go very far, but it did capture something. And it even captured the kind of the mind and the spirit of my mum. And I mentioned my mum once before. My mum is a Daily Mail reader. She's retired. She lives in a little rural village in Kent. She's absolutely convinced that there's going to be armies of migrants coming over to rape and pillage and to take everything out from her home that she can possibly identify. She's a Daily Mail reader. She stood at the last election as a UKIP candidate. So socially progressive, my mum is not, right? But even she gets this. Even she is angry with the banks, angry with the energy companies, angry with big businesses that seem to not be working in her best interests. So this isn't a political agenda. There is a recognition. Even Lord Saatchi, former chair of the Conservative Party, you know, basically announced that the energy companies in this country have created a cartel. They are holding us to ransom. If you look at the way in which some large companies like the Sercos and the G4Ss have been embroiled in fraud, fraudulently claiming for delivery of services that others, that we are paying for collectively, and still continue to deliver those services and be given contracts, there is an anger. However latent it is, there is a sense right across the globe that things aren't right and things need to be recalibrated so that businesses and politicians are working in the interests of us, the people, not necessarily in the interests of the 1% and the power base. So what's driving this? Well, there's some really curious things. At a time when we know that we've got all of these problems and issues and it's all a bit glum, and we're talking about the creation of long-term value in our society and in our economy. Just look at this. This is the Financial Times Stock Exchange, FTSE 100, average holding period between 1966 and 2005. at the very time that we need to take a much more long-term view of the world to tackle all of these major problems, what we see is shareholding has dropped from the average 8 years. So when, as an investor, I'd buy a share, I'd hold on to it for 8 years on average in 1966. We move forward through to 2005, and it's now 8 months. So that has been a massive decrease in the long-term view that organisations are able to take, because chief execs, management teams in powerful companies are beholden to their owners. They have a primary and fiduciary responsibility to meet the needs of their owners. And those institutional investors, the pension funds, the hedge funds, private equity firms, all of those investors are demanding shorter and shorter returns on their operating activities because they are switching their shares and their interests much more rapidly than ever before. And so what do you do if you're a chief executive of a company in order to satisfy that short-termist nature of your owners and investors? You find new ways to post bigger profits. And so what we've seen over the last few years is this huge scandal, actually, where these huge companies, whether it be Google, whether it be Amazon, whether it be Starbucks, and there are many more, are simply not paying any tax. And that tax matters because it's the tax take of the government that pays for our schools and our hospitals and our Sure Start centres, and to some extent it used to be our universities and our education system. So there is a major issue that needs to be tackled. And if you look at this next slide, I mean, this is currently the kind of the scale of the problem. So Starbucks in the past 3 years, £1.2 billion of turnover and zero profit. They didn't make a bean, excuse the pun. They didn't make a bean, and they paid no tax because they weren't making any money. Starbucks is not a charity. It is a hugely powerful corporation that has created a system of tax avoidance that is both legitimate and legal, but basically bleeds governments and statutory organisations of the very resources that we need to tackle some of these major challenges in our society. And so in Britain, £32 billion estimated in 2010-2011, at the very same time that we're cutting welfare by £18 billion. And if you look at the impact on the developing world, however much aid we throw through the likes of Oxfam, and don't get me started on Comic Relief, investing in tobacco and arms and everything else, it's £80 billion a year is lost by the developing world just by tax avoidance. And that £80 billion is estimated to have created 5.6 million deaths in 15 years. This is a major issue. So it's all a bit glum, it's all a bit depressing, and I'm very sorry about that. I'll take you all for a beer straight after this so that we can drown our souls. But I am an optimist, ladies and gentlemen. I am an optimist. However foolish I may be to be an optimist, I am an optimist. And I'm going to tell you why I am an optimist. And this is what I'm here to do. So what can solve these vast, interrelated, vast, seemingly impossible, complex problems? Do you know what the answer might be? Social enterprise. It's that good. So social enterprise is the answer. And what we are seeing is, as I say, these are some of the statistics. If you want the slides, you can have them. Please don't plagiarise them. But fundamentally, we are seeing the growth of a new type of business driven by young people to a very significant extent. Not just young people, but all of this growing up in a world of interconnected crises that just seem to come one after the other is helping people to rethink what it is to run a business, what it is to have democracy in a country. Can economics, can democracy, can social policy be kind of integrated into a new economic model? And I say yes. So let's see some of these incredible social entrepreneurs. I'll talk you through a few of them. This is Cressy. Cressy is an amazing social entrepreneur. She absolutely despairing of the amount of waste. What you probably might not be able to see in the background is this is all kind of fire hose, right? Fire hose. Fire hose that's fought fire for 30 years and then gets thrown into landfill. It's just landfilled, and there's a lot of it in the world. So Cressy has been taking this seemingly waste product and turning it into all sorts of amazing products. And I am the proud wearer of the cufflinks and the wallets. And yeah, I really believe in this shit, which is why I've got the cufflinks and the wallet. She's been creating these products. They're made in Britain. She's actually from Canada herself, but a young entrepreneur, committed to doing something. So she's employing disadvantaged people in a factory in Kent to make these highly luxurious items that are retailed right across the world, selling them in 15 countries. Cameron Diaz has one of the handbags at the Oscar ceremony. She put her Oscar into an Elvis and Cressy handbag. This is creating a whole range of social and environmental benefits, and all of the profits are going to, again, through charitable endeavours, tackle other social and environmental issues. Her workforce was, economically disadvantaged. Lots and lots of young people coming from the local prisons to help the rehabilitation of young offenders. And you've got these great products that are completely carbon neutral. Everything is recycled. My wallet has, as well as having my Greenpeace membership card within it, I used to work there, also is lined with parachute silk that would equally have been discarded. So completely carbon neutral, high quality product, and all the profits going to solve social problems. And you'll know Tim. I hope you know Tim. It's not too far from here. But Tim, as an entrepreneur, a big kind of quarry mess, came up with this idea, worked in collaboration with public agencies, private agencies, environmentalists to create Eden Project. And Eden Project has been responsible for fueling huge amounts of economic growth into Cornwall, and it's equally at the leading edge of some of the kind of sustainability science that needs to be developed if we're going to meet some of our kind of planetary challenges. And pants to poverty. I do believe in this stuff, ladies and gentlemen. I am wearing my pants to poverty today. I might show you after in the bar, any of you that are particularly desperate to see them. But Ben Ramsden set up Pants to Poverty. How can underwear change the world? Well, absolutely. He's now retailing vast amounts of underwear right across the world, making a healthy buck. These entrepreneurs are earning good salaries. They're not foregoing. This is not charity. They are running successful businesses, but they are changing the way that business is done. The cotton is organic. It goes way beyond fair trade. The cotton farmers are involved in the ownership of the company. And these pants, these very, very high quality, amazing pants, as I say, are being retailed right across the world, and they do women's and men's, and they're online, and you can find them anywhere. And the man with the cow is the cotton farmer's son, just in case you're wondering. And this is Karen. Like, we all know bottled water is terrible, and it's, isn't it awful that everyone drinks bottled water? The fact is we do drink bottled water. And so accepting that, Karen has taken Bellew Water, she didn't found the company, but has taken Bellew Water to a completely new level, retailing 18 million bottles of water every year. It's completely carbon neutral. The glass bottles are made from recycled glass. Everything is environmentally controlled. The water is sourced here in England, and all of the profits go to support water aid, so developing world projects, water projects in the developing world. A hugely successful business, stocked in Sainsbury's, stocked by some of the leading restaurants, and is an economic powerhouse that is funneling huge amounts of value overseas, and is creating an opportunity. So when you buy, Evian is manufactured by Coke, you now have a choice. You can put all of that profit not into ridiculously high salaries, etc. You can make a much better choice. And in the public sector, what we're seeing is major problems around NHS budgets being squeezed and restructures going on, and we're seeing all of these massive problems occur. We're also beginning to see the emergence of social enterprise in the delivery of public services. So parts of the NHS now are being delivered by social enterprises under the NHS badge, where staff are in control of the services. They're not under the control of the Secretary of State for Health. We're seeing Sure Start. This is London Early Years Foundation running Sure Start schemes and children's nurseries around the country. Jeff at Sandwell Community Caring Trust. Traditionally, you wouldn't bring a donkey into an old person's residential home. But actually, we're rethinking quality of life issues, health issues. It's not just about medicine. It's about a whole range of interventions that can be made to make money go further, to keep people well, to keep people feeling good about themselves. That has a huge impact on the costs that they then kind of burden the health service with. And we're just kind of beginning to rethink public services and make them much more entrepreneurial, and actually take them out of the ownership and control of the state and allow entrepreneurs, social entrepreneurs, to kind of rethink how public services can be delivered, remotivating staff. In these organisations, we've now got around 70,000 staff working that were formerly NHS staff, now working within social enterprises in health. On average, staff absenteeism in the NHS is just under 20%. So 1 in 5 working days are lost in the NHS through absenteeism, sickness and everything else. In these organisations, it's now less than 4% and going down. So that, in terms of productivity gain, is massive. So, it's not just about, innovation, it's also about bringing communities and staff and people with you together in a concerted mission to tackle social and environmental problems. And then you go, there's the Queen, that's not my mum. The role of social enterprises, charities and cooperatives in our public services will be enhanced. That was in the Queen's speech in 2010. What we have actually seen is a lot of pressure coming from the Sercos, the G4Ss, the Virgins of this world to say, don't give it to social enterprises and charities, give it to us, you can trust us. And of course, we have learned through the Olympic scandal and through a whole range of others that actually, the profit motive in public services creates a major, major tension. One of those tensions, let me just very briefly digress for a moment, is in children's residential care. 10 years ago, 80% of children's residential care homes in this country were run by charities. In the last, do you know how much it costs to keep a young person in in residential care? Any ideas? 70k? About £3 a week, so that's about 150k. The average budget to keep a young person in residential care is £200,000 a year. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. What happens when there's lots of money? All sorts of interests start gathering around it and going, there's money in them there hills. So what we've seen in the last 10, 15 years is now 68% of children's residential care is now being delivered by private equity-owned firms. So what we have seen, particularly in places like London and the South East, is the closure of children's residential care homes. They've migrated to Blackburn and Lancashire and Burnley. And why have they done that? Because it's cheaper, because property is cheaper. So they can take over the assets in Kent and Bournemouth and Dorset and other places like that, and in London particularly. They can flog those assets, they can make money and still provide the care, but this time in Burnley or Blackburn or Blackpool, where actually...
Can I just jump in? So how have they done that? Have they done that because they've outbid on or underbid on contracts?
Yes.
It's been a deliberate...
Yeah.
It's the commissioning process that's...
It's the commissioning and procurement process, which basically has traditionally been all about what can we get these services delivered for at the cheapest price. And if that means taking people to Blackburn and Burnley, then so be it, because it will be cheaper. Actually, what that means is the outcomes for those children are far, far worse. Sorry, you say you had a question.
I just wanted to come in on that, if I may, and just say what happens is that people build groups of care homes and then sell them to corporates, so the corporates then move in, take them on, then move in. Yeah, I mean, there is movement in that. I disagree that, to a certain extent, the movement is as pronounced as you said, but certainly that's what people want to take.
So there are now 500 care homes in Lancashire. It's that pronounced. For a residential population in Lancashire of around 1 million people. There are 400 care homes in London for an overall population of 10 million. That is a huge disbalance, and that means that if you are a child growing up in Camden and you're taken into residential care, the greatest chance you have is to be placed in Lancashire. When you're broken away from your school networks, your family networks, your social networks, you become more vulnerable. And therefore we have seen an increase in the number of vulnerable young people ending up in mental ill health services, criminal activity, prostitution and abuse. And we've published a report, if you want the full story on this and in other areas, called The Shadow State. It's available on our website. It's fully researched. It's written by a leading Guardian journalist, Zoe Williams, who we commissioned to do the research for us. And it documents what's happening in public services over a number of years and the impact that that has, not just in terms of the quality of life for those individuals, which is bad enough, that's a bad enough argument, but what you're actually doing is just pushing costs elsewhere into the system, be it criminal justice, be it mental health, be it addictions, and the court system. And so actually, although it might seem cheaper from a commissioning perspective, you're actually creating huge burdens for the taxpayer elsewhere in the system based on the fundamental principle that we can buy more cheaply if the private sector come in and deliver. What we've tried to do at Social Enterprise UK is radically shift that. So for the last couple of years, I've been campaigning very strongly for a social value bill. We were very successful in meeting Chris White, who's this gentleman here, who's the MP, Conservative MP for Leamington and Warwick, who recognises this problem and has championed through a private member's bill the Social Value Bill. And what it means is that any government contract, any university contract, any housing association contract, anybody spending public money must now take into account wider social value considerations. They cannot just commission on price alone. And that should rebalance things in favour of organisations that are building in strong commitments to their communities, their society, whether they are paying tax here in the UK, whether they are paying their workers beyond the minimum wage, paying living wage salaries, for example, whether they are creating apprenticeships and training opportunities. All of those kinds of issues can now be taken into account under the Social Value Act, which became a live piece of legislation in January 2013, earlier this year. And the Social Value Act, the reason why I mention it is this is a movement towards actually understanding that economic measurements alone are no longer fit for purpose given the constraints and challenges we have on planet Earth. We now need to take into consideration the amount of carbon companies are creating, the social contribution, the amount of tax they're paying if they want our business. And this is a good thing. And I would encourage you to challenge your university on how it is embedding social value principles for the benefit of the community in Bournemouth, Paul, and on the planet too. These considerations need to be hardwired into the kinds of decisions that government are taking when they spend our £100 billion a year. But you need to do that too as consumers.
Are you confident that that's gathering pace and that's now being taken up and being listened to, and that's good progress in that?
It's only 12 months, and 12 months is actually a very short time in politics, despite what you might hear. 3 weeks is a long time in politics. 12 months to get this legislation actually out on the ground is quite a short period of time. So the appetite is to strengthen the Social Value Act, not only to put a mandatory obligation for consideration, but for accounting for social value, is Social Value Act Mark II. These are small steps in a good direction, but we are seeing some incredible local authority leaders and some fantastic public sector leaders actually take the Social Value Act principles and really, really embed it into their thinking. I need to get on because I've got about 3 minutes left. So, time for business, right? So the last slide was social enterprise for business. Business is not evil. Business can be a force for good. And PwC, this is my office. This is the old fire station in Tooley Street. This is where I'm based, along with the School for Social Entrepreneurs and along with Brigade. And Brigade is a restaurant helped by PwC, who own this building. They've given it over to Social Enterprise UK, which is a beautiful Grade 2 listed fire station in the heart of London. We're up on the 3rd floor. I hope my desk isn't messy. The School for Social Entrepreneurs are on the 2nd floor, and the restaurant is on the ground on the 1st floor. The restaurant has now worked with 74 homeless apprentices to train and qualify them as high-quality chefs to move into the hotel and hospitality industry. 74, in the grand scheme of things, might not be an astounding number, but to get a big corporation like PwC to move in this direction is, and it took a lot of time and convincing, but they understand that their best interests, their future long-term value as a company is about social and environmental integrity. And Coca-Cola, I've slagged them off and said don't buy their water, but they are doing some remarkable things. When you go to Africa, and I used to work for Oxfam, so I've been to Africa many, many times, what is always startling is that you can't find clean water or a pharmacy, but wherever you go, you can always find a bottle of Coke. So how can we use the infrastructure of Coke to get medicines out into those communities where they are difficult to find? And here we can see really, really interesting medicine kits being built into the void of the Coca-Cola crates. So piggybacking, it's a bit like a symbiotic relationship with a bird on the back of a hippo. This is medicine packs going out using Coke's distribution to get medicine out to the far reaches of the planet. And an even more impressive example of this is Grameen and Danone. This is Mohammed Yunus. I hope you're familiar with him. He's a Nobel laureate for his work to create peace around the world. He convinced Grameen to build a yogurt factory in Bangladesh. The yogurts are full of all of the nutrients that children in Bangladesh are lacking. The yogurts are sold at very, very low cost. There is a slight profit margin in there. The money that they have sold, they've made by selling the yogurts has gone back to Danone to pay off the costs of the factory. And these yogurts have now been distributed to, I think, about 5 million Bangladeshi children, keeping them alive, helping with their malnutrition challenges. But it couldn't have been done by a charity alone. This has had to have been done using the power of business, their knowledge, their expertise and their skill to tackle a fundamental problem far more effectively than a kind of an NGO charity food parcel. This is about a sustainable model, and of course, as the profits, now the factory's been paid for, they're building more factories, and so this whole kind of program continues to grow and develop into other parts of Bangladesh and the developing world. And you are seeing some great leadership from some of these people. So the CEO of Diageo, are recognising that their customers, their staff, their investors will ultimately reject them unless they start thinking about integrating these social and environmental challenges into their core businesses. This is no longer about corporate social responsibility. And you've got Professor Michael Porter from Harvard, not all profit is equal. And we're seeing this huge movement across some of the leading business figures, recognising that they have a big role to play. And there you go, Paul Polman at Unilever. Any business that doesn't internalise these external challenges will be rejected. So the rise of the social investor, very briefly, because I'm going to whiz through this because this is the money bit and it's a bit boring. I'm on the board of Big Society Capital. We are finding a new role for social investors. You don't have any money, right? And you probably never will because you're students and you're going to be thoroughly indebted for the rest of your lives. But for people like my mum that might have £5,000 in an ISA, she should be given the opportunity to put that into a social ISA that goes into house building, that goes into programmes and opportunities to create jobs and well-being and environmental sustainability. And increasingly, these products are finding their way onto the market. Social impact bonds are creating an opportunity to create innovation in the private sector and in public services more broadly, whereby an investor is rewarded on a kind of a rate of return based on the success of the intervention. So I used to run a charity and a social enterprise myself. I was very successful at getting young offenders to stop offending. That was my business. I used to do a catering business. I had 5 cafes and restaurants. I ended up winning the contract for Downing Street. 2 of my young people I found in the toilets having sex, but that's a whole different story. It's great running a social enterprise. It teaches you all sorts of wonderful new things. But social impact bonds, are 19 of which are now in the UK, are really creating an opportunity to do performance-based interventions that really work and really tackle the problem rather than just maintain the problem, tackle the symptom. And crowdfunding is massive. My football team, AFC Wimbledon, my football team moved to Milton Keynes about 10 years ago. I was very angry about this. So me and another whole range of supporters got together. We all put in a few £100 and we built a new football club from the ground up. It is now a community-owned social enterprise football club and we own it. It's in our hands. The Fair Phone is now owned by 5,000 phone investors. It's conflict-free tin and titanium, so the mining extraction is not being taken from countries where the mining communities are exploited. It's completely carbon neutral, and there is an e-waste program. It has a replaceable battery, unlike your Apple phone, so that when the battery dies, you can replace it. And the entire supply chain is based on worker welfare and environmental sustainability. And that's, I think, originated from Denmark, I believe, in the last 12 months. And then you've got Kiva. You've now got, I think, over 1 million investors investing in social change around the world. You invest in these business startups, and once the recipient of that investment is running their social enterprise, the money goes back to you. So you can continue to invest, and I'm a Kiva investor. And we're seeing this whole dynamic shift in community ownership of renewable energy, farmers markets, grocery stores, football clubs, libraries, pubs. This is the island of Gia. And the community bought their own island back from their rich American absent landlord so they could take control of their economic and environmental future. And they are making a huge go of it. The population has increased. It's a remarkable story. These are the sorts of products that you can choose to buy. You know, there are products and services out there, and we encourage you to buy social. You know, so much of our protesting is about, you know, kind of taking to the streets and saying no. I'm encouraging you all to think through your life choices as you build your careers and your futures. You can do a number of remarkable things, but even if you're not up for doing remarkable things, you can still make choices in how you spend your money, what sort of employer you work for. You know, changing the world is basically down to you. So good luck. And what sort of revolution do we want? Obviously Russell Brand saying to people don't vote. I say do vote. I say we want a different kind of revolution, and I'm very, very briefly going to just show you this.
Imagine your money could really mean change. Social enterprises are businesses that reinvest their profits. They put people and planet first. From caring for children in developing countries to supporting the communities we're part of. Buying from social enterprises takes your spending much further. What we buy can educate, nurture and empower, providing solutions to some of the world's greatest challenges. Whether it's reducing food waste, supplying clean, safe water, producing affordable green energy, or getting people back into employment. At work or at play, there is a social enterprise for just about everything. There are more than 70,000 in the UK, led and supported by inspiring people all over the country, including some familiar faces. Join the revolution, buy social, and unleash your spending power.
So I suppose just in my kind of final thoughts really, is that, you know, you're a politics society. We can no longer expect, I don't think, our politicians to solve these problems. I think that we have to recognise the interrelationship between a democratic deficit, an economic power deficit, and the huge social and environmental problems that we need to solve. So politics needs to be driven outside from Westminster, inside the heart of our economy, because it's our economy that is creating many of the challenges, but also provides some of the solutions that we need to continue to evolve if we're going to meet some of the problems that I've hopefully articulated to you today. Karen used to work in the pharmaceutical industry. She joined the social enterprise movement and set up Hill Holt Wood with her husband, Nigel. They live in the most beautiful woodland, in the most beautiful off-grid house, which is completely environmentally sustainable. They've never looked back from giving up their corporate careers and doing something that is both economically viable, but also socially and environmentally impactful. We've got a whole kind of revolution taking place. This is my best friend, Sue Perkins, with some of our social enterprise cities, Plymouth, Bristol and Alston Moor, celebrating the fact that these are organisations, or cities and places and towns that are really driving the agenda forwards. This is a genuinely global movement, and this is a global opportunity to address some of the big challenges that we face. Thank you, and I'm sorry for overrunning, but I'm happy to take any questions.